joining this latest CustomerSure webinar. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. So really excited about this particular webinar. It's slightly different in that we've actually got a panel of CX professionals from other housing associations joining me, and we'll be talking about all about stop chasing TSMs and talking about the hidden driver of satisfaction performance in social housing. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin the webinar in full. So it's going to be around 45 minutes, the webinar, and there's a chat box at the side. So if people have any questions, then they're welcome to put those questions in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end to answer some questions. Also at the end, you'll be asked to give your feedback on the webinar. Not surprising, CustomerSure are big on customer feedback. So your thoughts or comments or things that you'd like us to cover in future webinars as well, they're greatly received as well. Just to begin, just with an introduction. So for those of you that have not met or seen myself before, my name is Darren Wake. I'm head of customer success at CustomerSure, and I work with all our social housing clients and contacts. I've been working with housing associations for the last, goodness, like 12 years now, going back to helping with status and star surveys, and more recently TSMs and transactional programs. So I'll be kind of chairing the conversation, but really excited to welcome my guests, Richard, Stephen and Howard, and I'll just get each of them to introduce themselves briefly. Could I start with you, Richard?
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Baggett. I'm very disappointed that Howard's got a slightly longer job title than me, although he seems to have dropped off the call now. So I'm head of change business intelligence and communications at Connect Housing, and I'm responsible for both the implementation of the TSMs, and have been from the start, and the publishing and the working of the results. And I've been a CustomerSure customer for 4 or 5 years now, so I've worked with Darren on bringing the TSMs in through CustomerSure.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard. Hopefully it's a technical glitch, I guess, at Howard's end. Hopefully he'll be back with us. But Stephen, if I can hand over to you.
Sure thing. So my name is Stephen Love, and I'm Accent Group's Customer Insight Manager and Performance Reporting Manager. So anything that's kind of insight related or performance reporting sits within myself and the team. Little bit of history around myself in terms of housing. Relatively new still to housing, probably about 18 months in the sector. But prior to that, I was working in education, doing a very similar role, looking at performance reporting insights. So yeah, that's me.
Great stuff. Hopefully Howard will be back with us, but I'm not going to speak on his behalf, but Howard is the head of customer feedback and insight at Sovereign Network Group, and hopefully he'll be back with us to share his views. But just to dive straight into what we'll be covering on this webinar, we're really going to be talking about the hidden driver of satisfaction performance within social housing. So it's very much a conversational piece with the guys on this webinar, but we kind of want to get under the skin of why TSMs may behave as a lagging indicator, and talking specifically about how to use transactional customer feedback to support day-to-day service improvement, and linked to that, prioritizing and assigning feedback best practice. One of the key things we often talk with our housing clients about is about improving how insight is shared internally. So it'd be great to hear the views from the guys on that. And also talking about closing the loop with customers confidently and consistently. And also about finally talking to boards about TSM performance. Before we kind of get into those topics, Howard, hope good to see you there again. So I just did some previous introductions. I don't know if you just want to briefly introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I could hear you, but I don't think you could see me. Yeah, so I've been at Sovereign Network Group now for about 6 years. My background is not housing, it's commercial, and I look after customer insights and feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Howard. So we've kind of got 5 main topic areas that we'd like to talk about, and for each of these, I'll kind of ask the guys their views. The first area we're going to talk about is what changed for you when TSMs became a visible board level focus, if indeed they did. So if I can just, I guess, start by handing over to Richard to open us up on this one. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first of all, there's two main areas. First of all, scrutiny in new areas that we weren't previously scrutinised in. We've always done transactional surveys, complaints, repairs, etc. But now to start having regular reporting around neighbourhoods and communities and safety and other things like that meant that there was a new focus on areas that previously hadn't had that focus. And the second thing that was a big one was, and I'm going to use this phrase carefully, but setting hairs running. That we do the census approach. We survey 1/12 of our customers every month, essentially, and therefore we can report through the year in each board how we're going. And that I think board have been wanting answers to things very quickly on new areas that we weren't previously reporting on, but it's not necessarily the whole picture. And that's a real challenge for us.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. How about yourselves at Accent, Stephen, on this area?
Yeah, so start probably by being really honest with you on this one. I think for us initially, we kind of saw it more as a kind of compliance exercise rather than really a genuine driver of change. But what's really shifted for us is probably a leadership change that's happened within the organisation. Over the last 18 months, we had a new chief exec, a new board chair, and what they did was they kind of brought a very clear mandate with them that no significant decision is to be made really without kind of the voice of the customer informing it. And that's really created a real cultural shift in terms of changing that conversation. So, we had TSMs embedded in our performance reporting, but they were just really headline figures. We weren't really looking under the bonnet as to what was driving them. And like I say, the realization that improving the score isn't the same as improving the service really did come through that leadership change that I've just described. And I just want to quote really, actually, just from a recent meeting that we had. It was our director of governance and regulation. I thought she put it really well. She's put, we need to stop chasing a C1 rating and just chase what's right for the customer. And it's still early days, but that's kind of the methodology that we're going with. And I know it's quite cliched, but it kind of reminds me of the principle at Amazon where, in meetings, they'll put an empty chair there to represent the customer. And it's that really that we're trying to embody really moving forward.
I think it's really insightful.
So, sorry, Darren, I'm interested in that, Stephen, because I think we've got that philosophy within our leadership team and with our management structure. But are you getting that at the board as well?
We're starting to, yeah, which is great, and we're getting a lot more focus and I guess challenge at board about kind of what is it we're doing and why, what's it based on, and have the customers seen this, have they had input on this. And that is, like I say, still early days, but it is really starting to kind of trickle down and embed throughout the business. So yeah, really, really positive stuff.
It's good to hear that, really, Stephen. Interesting that you say about rather than flipping it, how's the performance doing, but what does it mean for the customer, and a very different lens, if you like. What about yourselves, Howard, at Sovereign Network in this area?
Yeah, I concur with what you guys have said. I think there's a few other things as well for us. For me personally, we've moved from a push to a pull team. So rather than having to push customer feedback on teams and tell them how important it is, people have started coming to us now to ask what customers are saying, which is as a direct result really of being the TSMs being exposed to the board. We also find that board wants more granularity. So we're digging down now to segment, we're digging by locality to try and really identify the areas where we can make improvements. And we've also expanded our reach outwards as well. So so the board can fully contextualise what they're seeing with the TSMs, we've introduced more benchmarking, and we've engaged with other housing associations on joint research collaborations. So we're getting a much more contextualised picture for board, so they can understand what 60% or 70 or 80% means in any score. But perhaps the most important thing for me is seems to have created greater accountability within the organisation.
Mm.
So we find service area leads and now take these scores very, very seriously, as opposed to before, when operational metrics were sort of the be all and end all.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting when you're getting that demand from the organisation rather than data imposed on them. I think that's quite a good shift in mindset. I mentioned earlier we like to have some participation in our webinars, so we have a couple of polls. This is the first one here, so hopefully this has just appeared on everyone's screen. So if you're able to answer this, so thinking about what's the biggest pressure the organisation feels around TSMs today. And there's 5 different options there. So if you're able to give us your thoughts on that, and we'll revisit in a moment. Thank you. Moving on to another area, we're thinking specifically about where does transactional feedback make the biggest difference in housing services, do you think, from your point of view? Thinking about particular service areas where listening has a key or biggest impact on TSM and housing service performance. So if we can start with Stephen on this one, if that's okay, Stephen.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll just like to give probably a personal example from what we found out recently. It's probably from our complaint handling. So we're doing some analysis very recently on this over the last couple of months, and some real clear themes were kind of emerging, and that's that customers were kind of frustrated with some of the outcomes that they were getting, and also the process. So in terms of the process itself, it allowed us to kind of do a bit of a deeper dive as to what those frustrations were. And it was really around a couple of things, really. It was that the customers perceived that they weren't necessarily being listened to or treated with maybe the right level of respect throughout the call. So what we did off the back of that was we then adjusted the process, and we targeted some kind of individualized training for the complaints team. Just kind of upskill them, give them the tools that were needed to really to deal with those calls when they were coming in. And just from that kind of small change, we did see a real shift in kind of sentiment from customers. We saw a doubling in our CSAT scores with the complaints team. And with our TSMs, we actually saw an 8% increase in those scores. And that was off the back of looking at those transactional surveys. So yeah, just for me, it just shows you just the importance of using that data that we get from transactional surveys, not letting it just sit there. Again, looking at kind of what's the driving factors behind those scores that are coming in, and also capturing that sentiment while it's really still fresh. I think that's really key as well. Not letting it sit there, not letting it lag, because often feedback can kind of sit there, and by the time you actually looked at it and done something with it, maybe things have changed for customers. So it's about making sure that, the actions that we are doing are still fresh and relevant.
Yeah, good points. How about you, Richard, at Connect?
Well, one of the things with the TSMs, obviously with it being perception based, and I know from some of the conversations and benchmarking, and I think a lot of providers are seeing this, what customers are marking in the perception survey doesn't necessarily reflect on any transactions they've completed. Best illustrated with complaints, actually. When we analysed our complaint data, we found that a very small proportion of the customers who were marking and saying, yes, they have raised a complaint with Connect in the last 12 months, had actually raised a complaint. So that's an issue in itself of kind of validating the perceptions and trying to match it into transactional activity. A good example, though, of where we use transactional surveys and then indirectly impacts on TSM performance is in our estate survey. So anyone that's paid a service charge receives an estate survey, a transactional survey, and from that we were able to drive into some of the comments and see that they were finding inquiries about the estates very difficult to handle. So we put some corrective measures in place, retrained some staff, made more information available, and we're seeing directly that the estate survey now is massively increasing in terms of that feedback. What we'll get, though, is the lag in terms of the TSMs, that we've got to wait for the to be resurveyed with the TSM survey and to allow those measures to come through. And kind of tying that back up to the first question, that's where kind of our board are kind of wanting results, what you're doing about it. So we're having to really ensure that we're tracking those action plans to board and showing them what we've done and explain to them that it's going to take a lag before it comes through to the TSMs.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, I think we often see that lag happening, and really, you're right. It's a perception-based survey, but there's all these individual journeys, if you like, that are critical to the customer's life, really, and their home experience that form that broader opinion. Thanks, guys, for contributing to the poll, actually. So interesting answers coming in there that nearly half of you saying the biggest pressure is actually turning the feedback into operational change, I should say. So actually using that feedback and insight into actual change that makes a benefit. That seems to be the biggest pressure or challenge people are having, and we'll come on to that in some of the other points in this conversation. Also, demonstrating improvements to the board regulator as well. A quarter of you saying that's a particular pressure as well. So interesting. Thanks for those thoughts. Howard, just handing over to you on this point at Sovereign and about the transactional feedback and where you think it makes a difference in the services.
Yeah, a lot of it's already been said, and for us, it's having that real-time view, being able to react quickly. Think we can fix or things that need fixing, but the only difference for us is that we use it a lot in our customer journey mapping, because running these kind of surveys allows us to ask very specific questions about specific points in the journey, and we work very closely with our mapping team so that we can get that feedback to them. So that's main, as well as the real time, that's a big difference for us.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I mean, having that link to the customer journey mapping piece, just out of interest, Howard, is that what you've done? Have you done the journey maps, looking across all these different experiences to understand what points it makes sense to get that feedback across, whether it be responsive repairs?
Yeah. So for instance, say we have a dedicated team that just does journey maps for all the journeys in SNG, but focusing on the main ones. So if we're looking at a property journey, for example, we're able to identify very, very quickly at what point in the journey dissatisfaction becomes evident, and more to the point, we're then able to drill down into why it becomes why people are dissatisfied, and that then gives us the scope to change the processes, change the procedures that we put in place around that part of the journey to improve it. So it allows us to be very, very specific about what we're looking at.
Interesting. Very good. That kind of leads us on quite nicely, actually, to the next area I would like to talk about, which is about what's happening to feedback after it's collected. So thinking specifically, it's quite a major piece, actually, and feeds back to the leading answer from that last poll, which is about turning feedback into operational change and making a difference for the customers. So just interested in your three organizations, what happens to feedback after it's collected to make those improvements. So I don't know if I can kick this one off with you, Richard.
Well, first of all, I build on what Howard says, that the real-time element of getting feedback and action in it. Any positive and negative feedback is an opportunity to do service recovery or service reinforcement. So we are jumping onto to all responses, transactional and TSM surveys, and I appreciate TSMs are anonymized, but we do ask for any comments the customers want to tell us and respond to those. So that makes a big difference. We use I'm not trying to flog your tool, Darren, but we use the CustomerSure tool to tag the feedback, send it straight out to service managers, and then seek for them to close the feedback down by taking any corrective actions. But the biggest challenge that we've got, one of the challenges that we've faced over the last couple of years, is that this is new to a lot of people within housing. They haven't had this level of data, this level of insight. And so it's a new thing they have to do that's not in their job description, and for years they've worked in a certain way, and feedback has never really driven them before. So we've definitely had a challenge in bringing it through. We do a number of different things now, but first of all, we share the insight internally through all of our internal communication channels and make sure people are aware. So I'd like to think you can pick something up and connect and they understand how we're performing. We also now convert this into kind of a really detailed insight report that we publish every quarter, that means we have to pause and think about what we're going to do about the feedback. It's kind of forced us to do that. And then the actions, one of the reasons why I have a longer job title is that within my job title, I've got business intelligence and change. So through the change element within my team, the insights that we're capturing, we convert them into action plans, and then our change team can manage those action plans through and make sure that they're chasing people up. So it's taken us a while to win over the hearts and minds of taking it to our colleagues and getting them to understand the value that it brings. But I think we're towards the end of that journey now, and we're seeing the success of it.
It's really interesting. Thanks, Richard. I mean, one thing I always stress really is in all organizations across all sectors, not just housing, but ultimately the data and the feedback leads to insights, but the insights are meaningless unless it actually leads to meaningful change that impacts the most important people here, which are the customers. Now, any change that happens needs to take into consideration any limitations or time or resources required to make the changes. But there may be some quick wins in behavioural changes, responsive repairs experience, or adjusting how you communicate with customers that can have a big impact. So I think what you do, Rich, is quite key about making sure that insight isn't just a kind of a dashboard or report, but rather an actionable piece that's actually for these people in your role, this is what you perhaps need to focus on to make things better. And they're the guys on the ground that have the biggest impact. Stephen, what about yourselves at Accent? I know you've got the kind of evolving process there, but what's your take on this one?
Yeah, you'll probably see a bit of a theme in my answers. We're very much on a journey with all of this, and I think just to kind of concur with one of the sentiments you just mentioned there, Darren, it is that problem of going from insight to action that we've really struggled with. So traditionally, we've produced kind of insight reports and bits. They've gone to our service improvement forum, and they've kind of really just kind of sat in that space. And it's about getting them to come out of that space into, like, say, service improvement and how we're going to do that. So, like I say, very much on that journey at the moment, but we're starting to compile our customer voice report. So that's kind of the next steps for us, where we're taking lots of different kind of customer data from all different customer touch points. We're putting it through kind of AI assisted sentiment analysis, and that's going to be really kind of the linchpin really around what our customers are telling us, and it's that's going to be our kind of starting point for those conversations moving forward. Rather than having lots of different reports saying lots of different things, we want to be going solely from that one mechanism and using that as the vehicle really to kind of push that change. Something one of our engaged customers said to us very recently, which has really stuck, and that is, "You did, we feel." And it's kind of flipping the traditional "you said, we did" model. And it's kind of asking that harder question. So, based on what we've actually changed, how do customers actually feel about it, and then what do then we need to do next? What's it telling us that we need to do next? So all that's kind of in the works at the moment, and we're also trying to consolidate as well all of the different groups and action plans across the business into one kind of steering group, really. Again, to reduce duplication of efforts, to ensure that all that insight, that customer voice report is in the right place with the right people in the room. And I think as well, that should help reduce kind of decision paralysis, which we've kind of been very much a victim of. And also trying to, again, have that transparency. So any of this work I want to try and publish on our website, having genuine accountability rather than just reporting for reporting's sake. So that's the plan moving forward, and that's the work that we're kind of currently undertaking at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I think I always remember one of the things I heard years ago, and it stuck with me. It says people forget what people said, but they always remember how you made them feel, and it is that whole emotional side of it, and the impact of an interaction or an experience. It's the feeling that lasts a lot longer than the actual what was said or what happened. And I think it's interesting if you're kind of trying to ascertain that. One of the things we're keen on doing now is understand that emotion and that feeling behind interactions, and what creates the joy, what creates the despair, really. And that can then feed into, service improvement to replicate that good stuff going forward. No, great. Howard, what's the situation at Sovereign with regards to collecting feedback? Sorry, what happens to the feedback after collection?
It used to be that a few people would see some sort of voice to customer report. We've changed that now, so everyone in the organisation, from the front line to the board, can see the same report. So what we report to board is exactly what anyone else can see as well. And within that report, you both mentioned it earlier, is accountability. So it's rather than just being, this is nice to know, the customers are feeling like this, isn't that interesting? We have specific slides within that report that have, how shall I say, and action plans associated with insights that we've derived. So if we've said there's an issue here, here, and here, we don't leave it at that. We get the director to comment, we get the heads of service to comment, and they're documented. So when we represent the report the following quarter, they have to answer to what they promised in the previous report. So we have a record and audit trail of how people are responding to customer feedback and what we're doing about it. So that for me feels really important, because it really sort of validates it for people that are having to carry out the actions at the front line. The other thing that we do that's really quite effective is on a much more granular level. We have a survey that goes out every month, and based on that survey, we respond to customers directly. So rather than, and that would be done on a locality basis, it's called Close the Loop. So if a customer in Bristol tells us about their garage door perhaps squeaking or not fitting, they won't be called centrally, they'll be called by a local officer who will then solve that problem. So what we're trying to do is, with the Voice of the Customer report, create cultural change within the organisation, but with the close the loop mechanism, by responding to feedback directly, we're trying to show people that we're connected to them and that they can trust us to deliver within their local communities. So we're trying to hit both sides, really.
No, very good, very good. I like that kind of immediate action and response by locality teams. Certainly adds a lot of value. Just another poll, actually. Thank you everyone for participating in the first one. So the second one is, what do you think is the biggest barrier to turning customer feedback into improvement? So I'm very curious to see what people's thoughts are on this, and we'll reflect back on the answers in a moment or two. The fourth area we'd like to look at is kind of thinking about getting the data and the insight leading to some sort of action, and deciding or perhaps prioritizing what needs action now versus what can wait. So I guess it falls into almost the service recovery and service improvement areas. And yeah, what helps you distinguish between the themes that require change, or whether it's more of an isolated issue. Richard, if I could start with you on this one, and the situation at Connect.
Yeah, well, as Howard says, as per my last answer, we do immediate feedback, or immediate review of feedback, and an action that pass out to our service leads, our heads of, to deal with. With the trying to move the needle on the scores with kind of the more long-term strategic stuff. That's the stuff that comes through our normal priority plan, and looking at it against our corporate priorities, discussing it with board, taking a steer from leadership team, as to what we can do, and it is a time versus effort. What resources we've got available. So that is the longer term stuff. But building on what Howard says, it's about the tracking. It's about making sure we deliver on what it is. We turn it into actions, and then making sure that we're working through what those actions are. And I think, again, and this goes back to the very first question, it all needs to be done now. You know, that's part of what board is asking for. That's part of what our exec team is expecting. We want to move everything forward very quickly. So one of the key factors for us when trying to have those prioritization discussions with the powers that be is to understand the benchmarking. That's really powerful. And it's difficult with the TSMs, obviously, because you want to be trying to compare like for like. You not just look at the national picture, or look at housing associations like us, and then try and look where we're behind the curve, where we're below in the metrics, and then focusing on those areas. We know the 3 or 4 areas where we're not performing as well, and that helps form the priority as well.
Oh, really interesting. Yeah, thank you. Just thanks everyone for answering that last poll as well, actually, where we're asking about what do you think is the biggest barriers into turning customer feedback into an improvement. And there's kind of a clear winner there where people are saying it's lack of ownership across departments. That's kind of the biggest issue in terms of making that improvement. Just building on what you said there, Richard, that issue about lack of ownership across departments. How do you combat that within Connect? And then I'll see what the other guys think.
Well, something very similar to what Howard said. Although my team, I'm responsible for the insights and the production of the reports. You know, I don't have ownership of that. I engage with the rest of the organisation so that I'm expecting them to come up with the solutions, them to come up with the action plans, and I'm the tracker. And I say my team are the tracker, so that we get that buy-in. And having said that, it is a challenge. It's, you know, and it goes back again to a point I made. This is new world to a lot of people, something they haven't done for years and years. Then now suddenly there's a metric that they're expected to drive, but they haven't been given extra resource to do that. They haven't been time in the diary to do that. And we know that, you know, we've all got short pockets and we're stretched as a sector. So we're already, you know, under-resourced and feeling the pressure. And the regulator's asking for more and more as every day. So it really is challenging. And it isn't, I don't think there's a quick win there. But I think those of us that work in insights understand that we can use data and we can use metrics to drive long-term benefits. And it's about engaging with people so that they understand if you do these small changes now, if you commit and put the work in at the front, you will see benefits. I appreciate you might not see the benefits for several months, but this will reduce contacts. It will reduce complaints. It will improve your customer satisfaction scores. And there is benefits to you and your teams for doing this. But it's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, and that's why we're employed to do this stuff.
Yeah. No, well said. No, some great tips there. Thanks, Richard. Stephen, what about yourselves?
Yeah, I think this is a real challenge when it comes to customer insight work. I think for us, what we've seen is volume and pattern matter. So I'll give you a little bit of an example. So looking at TSMs this year, we're looking at LCHO customers, and we'll break it down by region and do some analysis. And one of the scores for one of the TP questions was really, really low. And the instinct was to just act on that instantly, you know, we need to do something, we need to change something. But then when we just looked a little bit in more detail, we saw that actually it was only 8 customers that actually responded to that particular question. So running off and changing process and procedure or something on that would have probably been the wrong call. So for us, it's, you know, looking at kind of themes across multiple channels really, and trying to bring that together to see, you know, do we have something that's surfacing across multiple channels, and using that really to inform procedure and change within the business and service change. And it's one of the, I guess, the driving factors behind what we're trying to do at the moment with our customer voice report, bringing all that into one space. You know, having siloed feedback can lead, I guess, from that example there, to kind of overreaction. It can cause us to, you know, to miss patterns. And by, you know, looking at our feedback across all of our channels, we get more of a, I would say, an honest picture of really what's going on for our customers that will allow us to prioritise a lot better. I think as well, just want to add on that, you know, ultimately we do need that kind of human judgment at the end of the day as well. You know, looking at the data, you know, using the technology that's available, but we still need that kind of experience, you know, from colleagues. I just wanted to highlight that really. I think that's really still key in all of this. So you've got to kind of use both in tandem.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I think having that, like, the kind of the two connected is quite an important role. Howard, if I can just turn to you now on this whole action piece and prioritization of that and how you tackle that.
Yeah, the big thing for us is being aligned with the rest of the business. So we're quite closely embedded with all the business areas, so we know their focus areas, and so that's the first thing. So what's important to the business and to our service areas, that will help me prioritize. But then there are also other issues like compliance, as we're all aware of, certain things we have to prioritize. And for us, safeguarding as well. We're very conscious about the fact that we have vulnerable customers, customers needing additional support within our base, and so that will also influence the prioritization process for me and for the rest of the team. And when we do get the information and what we're going to do with it, this closeness we have with the other service areas is really important, because we've got visibility of their transformation projects, so we can see immediately where they're focusing and how our feedback can support that. But also, if our stuff falls outside of that, there's an opportunity then for us to say to the business, well, we think this is important, but you're not covering it in the transformation projects. So there's no hard and fast rule for how we prioritize. All these things sort of come into play, and we have to make a judgment call at the end of the day. And then from a purely sort of measurement point of view, we're also in a position to say to the rest of the company, if you tweak this, it's not going to impact on customer satisfaction. But if you change this, you can increase customer satisfaction. So it's a double-edged sword, really. It's what we need to do for customers in the business, but also what we could do to improve our metrics.
No, great. Really interesting. I think that leads us quite well, Howard, actually onto the final point. And if I can start with you, Howard, on this one.
Yeah, sure.
Break. So this is a really interesting, it ties into the first point, but it's about how you talk to the senior leadership team and the board about TSM performance without overpromising. So kind of setting expectations and positioning it in the right way to give that confidence. So yeah, how do you tackle this one? Yeah.
I'll be honest, this has been a long-term project for me. So over the last couple of years, whenever I've had to present to senior management and the board, it's all about trying to instill patience in them, trying to explain to them a perception measure is, what a transactional measure is, why one changes faster than the other. So it's an education piece, so that they don't suddenly expect the TSMs to change overnight. So can you still hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
so that's one side. So getting them to understand how the metrics works. The other thing that we're very keen to do is we always, where possible, we'll always talk about long-term trends. We try to move them away from looking at month-on-month performance. We don't want knee-jerk reactions. We're trying to get them into that mindset where they're thinking longer term rather than month-on-month. And the other thing we do is when we talk about what directors are promising to do for the business, we also provide a context. So we provide an SNG context. So property are promising to do this, but this is what we've got to remember in terms of resourcing, supply, and all the other issues. But also we present the customer's perspective as well. So, for example, TfL just released their latest sentiment figures, and social renters are, in terms of sentiment, on a downward trend, which bucks everything else in the UK. So how can we make people that are already feeling down happier? So I'm trying to give them the full picture rather than having them focus on why did this go up last month and down the next month.
Oh, really interesting. I think that's really insightful about giving them the whole picture and trying to set expectations and how they're connected with the transactional stuff that we talked about earlier. Stephen, what about yourselves at Accent on this? I shouldn't say a tricky point, but an area that you have to tread carefully in any housing association, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably echo Howard's comments there quite a lot, really. For us, it's honesty and context. These are the two things I'd say that we try and underpin our conversations with board. And the first thing really is trying to give board a bit of kind of contextual information around kind of benchmarking, kind of where we sit in relation to our peers. And the reason for this is to kind of, I guess, reduce kind of complacency if scores look acceptable, and also maybe reduce panic and alarm if they dip. So, giving them that kind of information, I think, gives them a really good kind of frame of reference. We're not just kind of looking at the numbers alone. But I think probably the most important thing that we probably communicated with board is that element of patience, trying to get across them that often seeing service improvement, there's a lag, isn't there? I think research shows around about 18 months after you kind of made a change to actually see a meaningful kind of sentiment shift. So asking for that patience, getting them to understand that things aren't going to again change overnight, but to remain patient on that journey as we try and improve things has been really key. I think as well, it's about going back to that comment about not chasing the C1 rating, but making sure that we're focusing again on what's right for the customer, and making sure that those conversations and that information is being surfaced at board level, and also making board aware of what the inputs and outputs are around those metrics. So just giving them that full picture and full context behind it all. And I think it's that really kind of creates kind of sustainable board confidence, really, kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, you make some really valid points there, and that 18-month lag, you can debate whether that time frame, but that definitely is a sizable amount of time that's in place. I often remember looking at a lot of TSM data, and sometimes it is a perception survey, like we said earlier, and people may have a perception that's based on an event that happened 3-4 years ago. And I've even seen it before where perception is actually based on something that didn't happen to them, but happened to a neighbour or happened to something that they were aware of. So it's not always grounded in reality for that individual customer, but perception of a wider stance that the housing association may have taken, for example. Richard, what about yourselves at Connect?
It's really building everything that Stephen and Howard have said, all of that. Certainly managing the board's expectations. I think in my first answer, it's about setting hairs running with the board, and I think that we spent time with them in educating them about the difference between perception and transactional surveys and the lag times, and the way I think that we got a very supportive board who are very interested in the customer. That's why I was interested in Stephen having a board that's that maybe was more chasing figures than doing what's right. So the way in which where we've settled and to say very supportive, I think it's really important. We always present the scores with the associated actions, so they're never presented in isolation. Our board every quarter want to know the TSM performance and some transactional data as well, but every single time it's not just presented as a number, it's presented as an action plan with that tracking on. And the other kind of top tip is that we also put all of this through our tenant voice, our tenant groups. So we've got a tenant voice group that meet frequently, and we always take their input and we always take their soundings on the action plans, the performance, and again, that is presented in context back to our board, so that there's assurance that we're not just reporting a number, we're reporting on what we're doing about it and what our tenants think about what we're doing about it. And that seems to be very supportive, and that seems to be very successful in we're not challenged on it too much. We're supported on it.
No, great. Thanks, Richard. I'm really conscious of time, so I'll just run through these last couple of slides and then hopefully just have one or two questions at the end. So we always talk about ensuring that data leads to insight, leads to action. That's what it's all about. And just a little bit on terms of how CustomerSure helps our social housing clients and clients across other sectors as well. But it's all about that. The big drive now we're seeing is about consolidating and understanding voice of customer. So we're utilizing a lot of text analytics and AI to produce summaries of service delivery areas. So summarizing all of data, surveys and other data inputs as well to say how well is a repair team operating, how we're doing in repair and cleanliness. Here's an insight to how well a team is doing with an associated action plan and tracking that across customer journey stages. And this is kind of things that we're seeing working with our clients is about making sure that data and insight just isn't a nice pretty dashboard like the guys mentioned earlier. It's actually leading to some actionable, some operational change on the front line. And I always say to get that operational change, it's about relevance. So it's each person in your organization has a role on customer experience, but sharing with them a load of numbers and dashboards doesn't always cut it, understandably. So it's saying they need to know, well, what do I need to do differently tomorrow? What action do I need to take to make things better? And it might be as simple as, well, look, guys, just make sure you're showing your ID badge when you're walking in a property, or you're wearing shoe protectors, or when even if there's no update to an ASB case, it's giving an update before a customer asks for one. There's lots of behavioural or those sort of changes that can make a big difference. The three guys mentioned this perfectly, actually, but about effective and tracked service recovery and making that part of business as usual. So what the guys at Connect and Accent and Sovereign Network are doing effectively is that whole service recovery piece of when feedback comes in. Okay, we know there's an issue with a repair, or someone's perhaps made a reference to a hot topic these days, and obviously quite rightly so, around black mold and damp in a property. Well, that should be automatically flagged as an action required, and then, as the chaps mentioned, triaged and sent to an operational team. And that's kind of the things that we're going. And it's so interesting from my point of view as an insight professional, if I can say, where 10, 15 years ago, it was all about, well, let's just produce a report and dashboard that's sent to an exec team or a leadership team and presented once a year. Well, that doesn't really drive any change from a customer perception or experience point of view. What drives the change is saying, actually, you've told us this is wrong, or it's broken, or something's not quite right, and then you're taking the action straight away to make it better. And if you do that consistently over time, then that ultimately is what will drive customer satisfaction and in turn TSMs. As Stephen said, there's a lag, but that kind of is what's kind of driving it. Almost saying do the basics right consistently. Yes, it's not easy. There's constraints, but if you do that, then that will have the biggest impact on perception over time. And I love that bit about what it made people feel as well. The communication side is key as well. What we've covered, I won't go through all of those again, but kind of some of the areas that we discussed on the webinar. Yeah. Really conscious of time. We've just overrun by a couple of minutes, but I did want to have a couple of questions that we've got here to throw up to the guys. One thing is around communication to the customer base generally. So we talked about service recovery, but how do you, in your three organizations, communicate customer sentiment and voice back to the wider group, the wider population of your customers? I'll pick on you, Richard, to start with on that kind of communication piece.
Yeah, so our insight report, which is not just putting in satisfaction stuff, it's a version of the voice of the customer, but we're also looking at external factors, external measures like the number of phone calls received, whether they're increasing or decreasing, and what customers are contacting us about. So it's starting to pull different bits of insight and seeing how they pair up. And that's published on our website, and it's shared internally. And we even take our service managers and our heads of service, we sit them down and actually talk them through it every quarter as well. So trying to keep from, and those customer voice groups again.
Interesting. Yeah, no, very good. And I think keeping it that front of mind with that regular updates is kind of key. Stephen, what about yourself in terms of that communication internally, but also communicating back to your wider customer population about what they've said and what you're doing? Are there any approaches you've seen work well?
We're trying to utilize our website a lot more, making sure that what's going on within the business that's relevant to our customers in terms of the service improvements, that we're actually shouting about it on the website, trying to drive traffic there, maybe through social media to make customers more aware of what we're doing. Also through our customer newsletter as well, we're trying to utilize that a lot more. And then we've not published it yet, but that voice of the customer report, and we want to work very, very closely with the comms team to ensure that the tone and the messaging within that report is right. But again, thinking about how we can also deliver that to customers in a way that it's going to reach them. So we're going to be looking at kind of customer contact preference and try and deliver it in ways that which the customers will prefer to receive that information. That's kind of what we're doing at the moment with it.
Really interesting. Yeah, I think that kind of regular heartbeat of communication out via different channels is quite important, and obviously digital's a big part of that. But then there are other traditional. I'm personally still a fan of the digital, but a paper-based newsletter as an update as well is quite good. Howard, what about yourselves on the communication side of things? Any best practice to share?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, but I wish for we've got four main things we do. We have very big customer engagement program that takes in roadshows, listening sessions, focus groups. We run a closer loop program that I mentioned earlier, where we come straight back to customers based on survey feedback. We have online presence, like you said we did, like many other organisations. And just recently, we've started using very tailored communications to our localities. So we have, rather than just saying this is what SNG is doing and has done, we talk specifically about the postcodes that are near the people that we're sending it to.
Interesting, yeah, and having that locality communications going out to the makes it relevant for them as well. And again, they can see what's going on. I mean, I think for my part, the communication is all about kind of transparency, frequency, and honesty as well. And this whole "you said we did, you said we are going to do" is really key. And even if customers don't experience one of the key events, people don't need a responsive repair, or they don't go through an ASB situation, or they don't have a complaint. Ideally, that's the perfect customer experience journey. But even if they don't, that doesn't mean they shouldn't be made aware of the improvements you've made in these areas, because they'll know about them from perhaps neighbours, or just know these things are happening. So that kind of, it's really interesting to see what Connect or Accent or Sovereign are doing in these areas will have an impact, even if they haven't walked in those shoes themselves. Really conscious of time, but and thank you everyone for sticking around a few minutes over. I've really enjoyed the session. I hope everyone on the webinar has found it of value to you. It's been great to share the platform with other housing associations. I hope the guys don't mind, but I put their LinkedIn connection links on here, so I'm sure Howard, Richard, and Stephen, if people reach out to you on LinkedIn or would like to connect, that's fine with you all. Just to conclude and say, Richard, Stephen, Howard, thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining it. Any final comments from any of you before we conclude?
All good for me.
I think Howard said something earlier. We're all in it together. We're not rivals, and I think that the TSMs have kind of, how are we doing compared to each other? I think there is something more that we can do by working together, by sharing learnings. And if anybody on the webinar, Stephen, Howard, want to reach out and connect with me to take that discussion forward, I'm more than happy to.
Thank you, Richard. That's great to hear. Yeah. Stephen, Howard, anything to conclude?
I just concur with Richard's comment there. Yeah, it's about working together, sharing good practice. Absolutely. So, all for that.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you very much, the three of you. Really appreciate taking time out to join this CustomerSure webinar. I've really enjoyed it. Cramming it all into 45 minutes is extremely tough. Like we said the other day, we could actually talk about this all afternoon, really, and go into a lot more detail about the comments as well. Final thing to say is, after this webinar, thank you all for your attention. You'll receive a survey from CustomerSure, because it's all about feedback and hearing what people would like to hear more from us. So we're really keen to hear about what future webinars you'd like to hear, any topic areas that are really important to you guys. We're doing a lot more work with social housing now, which is great, and we want to produce more valuable content and webinars, and we're always looking for other people to join us on these discussions as well. So leaves me to say thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and if you have any future other questions, please do reach out. Thank you everyone, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks, guys. Cheers. Thank you.